Yo, what up, Night Nation? I really wanted to do a video after collecting my thoughts a few days after the loss to Colorado. And I really wanted to be prepared for this video. I actually even took notes. Normally I do it off the top of my head, just how I'm feeling. But I wanted a couple days to pass, and I wanted to really kind of analyze everything and kind of process how I felt and, this loss in general and what it means for the team for the rest of this season. Um, First of all, I want to make it clear, there's a lot of negativity going around in UCF Nation right now, especially on social media, on Twitter. And I've, had my fair share of that negativity as well. But, I wanted to be really clear and express my thoughts in a way that is relatable and gets across my points without just going off the rails. But the reason for this video, I feel that I've officially lost faith in Coach Gus Malzahn. I know I've maybe joked around before on Twitter and said stuff like that. And I've always kind of given him the benefit of the doubt, truly in the back of my mind, given the benefit of the doubt. I felt, year one, tons of injuries like I'd never seen before. Second year, JRP was injured. Last year, the first year in the Big 12. But this feels like a turning point, this loss. We're in year 4 of the Gus Malzahn era, and it feels that the same repeated mistakes are occurring. Whether, maybe they're slightly different, but the overall kind of theme is the exact same type of things that occur in the season that ultimately derail it. And it's happened now for going on 4 straight years. And the overall reason why I feel I've kind of lost my faith in Malzahn is I just feel that the trajectory of the program is officially going downward. It just does not feel like it's on an upward path anymore. Like year one, when we had him, there was a lot of good vibes. We beat Florida, pulled together a 9-win season despite tons of injuries, losing obviously Dylan Gabriel, and there were so many injuries that year. That really felt like the best moment of this era when you really sit back and look at it from a 15,000 feet view and think about it. But it's really just kind of gone downhill. And there is the excitement of Gus Malzahn, the recruiting that he brings. That's one thing that galvanizes the fan base, something we have never seen from any of our coaches or at any point in UCF history, is classes that are in the top 25, top 35, multiple 4-star recruits and things like that, big name transfers and all that. But when you really start to break it down, it hasn't translated to everything. And I know that it's technically only been 3 classes, and you're not expecting a freshman class to all be studs right away, or even guys that are just in their second year. I get it, most of them are young, but usually sophomore year, junior year is where you start to see the breakout. And look, I know college football has been flipped on its head. It has, you have a lot of rentals now, 1-year rentals and quarterbacks, paid players, guys that are coming for 1 year. There's not a lot of time for chemistry, time to gel, time to develop. But that doesn't mean high school recruiting is dead. It's still part of the lifeblood of your program. At the end of the day, Gus Malzahn talks about how they had, whatever it is, 40 new players that are transfers. Well, that still means you have, whatever it is, 40 plus that are on the team from the previous year. It's not like every single player that he's recruited out of high school has transferred, right? So there's, I think, 3 reasons why I feel the trajectory is heading in the wrong direction. One, like I mentioned, is the repeated mistakes. There's the in-game mistakes, but there's the in-season mistakes that just don't quite ever to seem to be adjusted. Yes, there's incidents where he's made major changes. Obviously, last year he felt, he needed to pull Darren Hinshaw from OC duties and took over. There was, that time in 2022 when he pulled JRP out of the Navy game and put in Mikey Keene to try to get a spark. But overall, Gus has shown a propensity to be very stubborn when it comes to changes. Um, so it's the play calling. It's the lack of kind of creativity there. It's the in-game adjustments that don't ever seem to happen. It's sticking with players that maybe aren't working. And I know with paying players now, it makes it a little more difficult when they're kind of on this contract and you maybe invest a lot of funds in them that you kind of want to keep going to them, which is understandable, but you still got to play the best players. Um, then there's I think, just two massive coaching blunders 2 years in a row. You put Hinshaw and Addison Williams in charge. You pull Hinshaw after 7 games essentially last year. That's all you give him, and then you basically demote Addison Williams, who's widely considered an up and coming guy. And what do? You put in place Ted Roof, which most people were baffled by that move when he was hired. This is a journeyman that hasn't lasted anywhere longer than 3-4 years. I know he's been on some really good defenses, but there's also a reason that he hasn't lasted anywhere, and that is looking like an absolute disaster of a decision. I honestly at this point would have rather had Addison Williams develop, and if you didn't, I can understand why. There's a lot of stakes this year. You want to have maybe a guy that's a little bit more seasoned. I just don't believe that Ted Roof is the best choice. I have to think if they spent more time looking for someone around the country, that this is a desirable enough job in Florida in a Power Four conference that you could get someone. I'm not saying you can go out there and pull Alabama's DC or something like that. I'm not saying we have our pick of the litter, but I think we could have done better than a guy that has essentially switched schools every 2 years over the past decade plus. And his responses today or yesterday, whatever it was, at the press conference, talking about like no adjustments, just go out and execute, was one of the lamest responses I've ever seen. Like, basically just said, no, that was what we thought was going to happen, and we stuck with it. Like, where's the adjustment? People used to insult Randy Shannon, but the whole second half Randy mantra was a true thing. There's multiple incidents of how much the defense improved in the second half after making adjustments. It's part of football. So that was, to me, super concerning. Um, you know, then there's just the being out coached. It seemed to happen now in multiple games where coaches have kind of run circles around Malzahn, especially this last game. I mean, Deion Sanders is a legend, but he's an inexperienced coach. What has he been coaching for? 3 years now, 4 years now? Malzahn is a seasoned head coach. And to get out coached, like that at home, I think is fairly embarrassing, and there's multiple incidences of that. And I know Colorado has two extremely unique talents, but they came in and committed to stuffing the run, and UCF had no answer for it. They had no answer for their offense whatsoever. And I know in the game there was multiple mistakes, which I'll get to in a second. The second big reason why I think the trajectory is declining is the recruits that we get so excited about, the booms, so to speak. They're not playing. I looked here from the 2022 class. These guys are juniors, so you can't tell me that they're not veterans at this point that either should be playing or they're not good enough to be playing. It's one of two in my mind. Either they're not good enough to see the field, or they're getting no chance to develop because we're only bringing in transfers. And I completely get play the best player, whether it's a transfer or it is a recruit, whatever it is, young guy, old guy. But never giving these guys a chance to develop when you're also not winning doesn't really make sense. I just, how much better, I'm not saying as a whole, but how much better could every single one of these transfers be than every single one of these recruits? Especially when we hear in the offseason all this buzz about some of these guys, Burdell Richardson, we heard a lot about Jalen Hayward. We've heard, things about Walclair Flynn Jr. We heard things about there's big improvements from Isaiah Nixon, Andrew Harris. And these guys are not, they're getting very, very minimal snaps. Pretty much every single starter that's getting, call it over 40, 50 snaps a game, is a transfer from this past class, and they don't seem to be excelling. Case in point, most people know by now Xavier Townsend is redshirting the rest of the season. Apparently, reportedly, the coaching staff felt that you know that there are receivers on the team right now that would be an improvement over him, like Javarius Johnson, or maybe even Chauncey Magwood, who another player I know, he's a transfer that we heard a ton about, all the improvements in the offseason. Yet they chose to play Townsend. Maybe they didn't utilize him correctly. Maybe there's more going on there, but it's not like UCF has been crushing it in the passing game and all these. It's such a crowded receiver room. Like, they're starting Whittemore, who hasn't really done anything. When you heard all offseason about Magwood and Bradell Richardson, why aren't they getting an opportunity over, Whittemore? To me, it seems like Gus just prefers these super veteran guys regardless. So to me, it's either they're not playing because they're not good enough, which is a problem, or Gus is too stubborn to play them because he wants to play as veterans, which is also a problem. And maybe I'm sure there are plenty of, players that are transfers that are legitimately better and are more deserving of opportunity because they outplayed. But I have to think, with all the problems we have on defense, that some of these big time 4-star recruits should be playing or getting looks or having more effort to develop. And I don't know everything that goes behind the scenes, but that's just my personal opinion. So when you look at those recruits, 2022, I was going back to the juniors, there's literally 4 players that see any sort of significant snaps. I would call, at least 40 snaps a game significant. And that's Xavier Townsend, who's now done. Damari Henderson, not this year, but last year, he's injured, but we'll count him. Nakai Martinez, last year, he is obviously transferred, and Caden Kittler. So we're actually out of those 4. It's really only Caden Kittler, and then I guess Damari Henderson if he comes back, which we've heard nothing on him, so I don't know what's going on there. So 2, essentially, if you count Damari, now that X is transferring or redshirting, whatever, that's 2 players out of a 14-person class. That's concerning. 2023, a little better. Randy Pittman, Marshall, and John Walker. That's 3. And I know that's a younger class. They're sophomores, but most of the class, this is the class where we started getting like 4-star guys. They're in high 3-star guys. They're not playing. Okay. Then this year, 2024, not a single person, not a single freshman. That to me is very rare. You usually have at least 1 or 2 freshmen playing. And this was the class that was our best ever recruiting class historically on paper, and had 7, 8 4-stars. Not a single guy is really seeing the field. Chasen Johnson, DB, is the only one that's sort of seen the field. He got 9 snaps last game, and I think a few more in the garbage time when we were blowing out the first 2 opponents. And that's another guy. You heard about Chasen Johnson. You heard about Bradell Richardson. You heard about Jalen Hayward. You heard about Christian Peterson. Why are we hearing about them unless it's just lip service? Why aren't they getting any sort of playing time? I mean, are Mac McWilliams and Sheldon Arnold and some of these other guys crushing it in the secondary? Sure doesn't seem that way. Or the coaching staff isn't putting those guys in good positions to succeed, so either way, there's some sort of problem at the root there. And then I just am seeing a huge lack of development, especially at 5 positions. QB, we haven't developed anyone in years. Anyone under Gus Malzahn, because it's been all transfers. Wide receiver, not a single guy has developed, unless you want to count Xavier Townsend, kind of. Linebacker, none. And defensive back, really none. Those are 5 super key positions. And I get it. College football is different now. There's the portal era, and you get these veterans that you want to play the veterans. They have experience. You want to play that. You don't have time to develop the young guys as much, but there has to still be some sort of commitment to develop these guys, because we're not a program with unlimited NIL money where we could just buy the best transfers on the market. I get some of these transfers are really, really good. Some of them we've hit on. Deshaun Pace, obviously. RJ Harvey, even that predated NIL, looks like Miles Montgomery, some of these guys. But I just feel that if we're not able to get the best transfers, why aren't we developing 4-star talent? If there's the argument there's no time, there's no this, there's no that, then well, if you can't get the best transfers, but you can get top 35 recruiting classes, it seems like there should be some sort of commitment there that I'm just personally not seeing by the numbers of these guys playing. It's different if we were undefeated and like looking extremely good. I mean, even in the wins, there was complaints, and then the TCU game, we barely got out alive. It's one thing if these guys were absolutely just crushing it as a whole, 4-0, or dominating our opponents, and no, why you're going to play the best players, right? Why wouldn't you? But that's not the case. So I don't think these transfers as a whole can be that much significantly better than all of these recruits, or the recruits are busts, or there's literally no attempt to develop them, which I think that's a problem either way. So for me, it just feels like we are trending down. Then the third reason why I feel that way is we've blown way too many opportunities when we have a chance to really take the next step under Malzahn. The one time he kind of succeeded, I think, was beating Florida. That did a lot just for momentum, vibes, good feelings. Beating UF for the first time just did a lot of stuff. That was the only opportunity he really capitalized on, and that game was technically meaningless in the big scheme of things, like record, and it didn't get us to it wasn't in like a Premier Bowl game or anything like that, but it was a big moment. I won't say it wasn't. But then you look at year 2, where that team was significantly better than the year before, just with the players that they got. We start out the season pretty scorching hot, like 8-1. We get over the hump, finally beat Cincinnati, who was a ranked opponent. We avenge a loss to SMU that we had been blown out the year before. Everything is looking good. And what do? We fall flat on our face and lose 3 out of 4. We have, in the beginning of the season, we have a chance to host College Game Day. If we beat ECU, we go get blown out by them by double digits. We have a chance to host the conference championship if we're just to be able to beat Navy, who was a 2-win team at that point. What do? We lose the game. We beat Tulane in the conference championship, and we have the auto bid to the Cotton Bowl. What do? We lose by double digits to a team we had already beaten earlier in the year. And I get Tulane was good. I'm not saying they weren't, but it was just blown opportunity after blown opportunity that season. So many great things. I mean, that could have been a special year. We had obviously the horses to do it. We were 8-1 at one point. And I know there were some injuries to JRP there, but I just think that whole thing was mismanaged at the end. And we needed a prayer to beat USF, or we'd have finished the season on a 4-game losing streak. And we blew all of the goodwill, all the great things that could have happened that year. A conference championship, hosting a conference championship, hosting game day, going to the Cotton Bowl, all blown. Then last year, there wasn't too many, I would say, blown opportunities because we weren't that good. The one is just like, obviously, the Baylor game. That's going to be on everyone's mind forever. Basically, one of the biggest moments in school history, going to play our first ever Big 12 conference home game, and we blow a 4-touchdown lead in the fourth quarter that just zapped all the air out of the room and probably turned the season in a way where we could have probably been better than 6 wins last year. But I think that killed a lot of the momentum. Excuse me. And so that was, to me, a huge blown opportunity as well. Something that could have been really memorable. We win our first ever Big 12 home game. And what do? We absolutely blow it. Then this year, Big Noon Saturday coming onto campus, the biggest ever crowd in Big Noon Saturday history. Media's talking about it. The social media posts are amazing. The crowd is amazing. UCF fans showed up. That stadium I'm seeing on TV was rocking. I mean, that reminded me of some of the best moments, one of the best UCF home crowds we've ever seen. Very reminiscent of the College Game Day crowd against Cincinnati, reminiscent of the 2017 USF game. It was just unreal vibes, and we fall completely flat on our face and have our worst home defeat since our winless 2015 season. Our first time we've lost by double digits at home in almost 10 years. I just think that's unacceptable, regardless of how good Colorado ends up being. And I won't put that entirely on the coaching staff. There was some questionable stuff. A lot of people talked about the refs not calling holding on Colorado. Obviously, it's not Malzahn's fault that there was, turnovers that shot ourselves in the foot. But I mean, I just think of the red zone inefficiency. I think it was that first drive that we had gotten into the red zone. I think I can't remember if it was I think it was before the RJ Harvey touchdown that had tied the game. We passed the ball in 4 straight plays. Why are you not running it with Harvey one of those plays? That makes no sense. That's a coaching decision. And then, yeah, I know the other things were turnovers and Boomer missing field goals, but there was just a lot of mismanagement of that game. I mean, I think the first half ending, just why is the defense playing so far off from their receivers that just basically gave them a free, whatever it was, 7-8 yards, and then they nail a field goal? It's just like things like that are momentum killers, that those are purely coaching decisions. I'm not saying the players didn't execute on certain parts of the game, and I know the turnovers were obviously not the coaching staff's fault, but I don't feel like they put the team in a good enough position to win at a lot of key moments in the game where it was still salvageable. I mean, talking about being down 21-7 at one point, the game's not over. Even in the second half, the game wasn't over early. So just these blown opportunities, this is no longer a one-game sample size. The Colorado game, to me, was a microcosm of the entire Gus Malzahn era. And I'm not saying he's been a complete failure. 2 9-win seasons, making a conference title game, obviously the excitement and the recruiting, him elevating our profile nationally at least a bit, him being the person that transitioned us from the group of 5 into the Power 4 are, all banner moments. So I'm not going to sit there and look back and say it was all negative. But I just personally now, as someone that's watched, this is the 4th coaching staff I've seen since I've been a fan. And, I guess other than Frost, because, he could do no wrong, they all had blunders at certain moments. You're never going to be perfect. I'm not a fan that thinks 2017 or 2018 is the norm or is ever going to be something that we regularly experience. And I wasn't expecting to go undefeated this year, but the expectation is to compete in the conference, and I think that's a fair expectation. And all the moves that we made in the offseason were geared towards that. Malzahn even talked about it. I talked about it endlessly in my preseason kind of posts and previews and things like that. So for this Colorado game, really kind of took all the good vibes out of the win over TCU. And I'm not crying, by the way. I have a tickle in my throat. For me, within conference play, it feels like we've had one good quarter out of 8. That 4th quarter we played against TCU was great. But outside of that, we've had 7 really crappy quarters against our 2 best teams' opponents that we've played. And to me, that's the bigger sample size. Are you going to look at the 4th quarter for a miraculous comeback win? Or are you going to look at the 7 other quarters where we've played like absolute crap, where the secondary can't do much, and they're they're playing 90 yards off the ball. I'm exaggerating, but like 10 yards off the ball. We get 0 pass rush. We have 1 sack through 4 games, including against 2 weaker opponents. The D line looks like a completely regressed. Malachi Lawrence is like nowhere to be found. The passing game is okay, but how KJ kind of played in that week 1 when we were like, oh, maybe just the first week kind of thing, like seems to be more like the regular. I mean, he hasn't played that bad necessarily since that game, but he's not doing anything that great for someone that was a very heralded transfer, considered one of the best transfers in the market, considered the perfect fit for Malzahn, all these things. It seems like we have problems on both sides of the ball. The offense has obviously played better than the defense, and it's obviously a team that can rack up yards and score, but we're one of the worst teams right now in the country statistically in the red zone. extremely inefficient there. We blow a lot of scoring opportunities. The passing game is okay, I think at best. It has its moments, but it's not great. No one else can get the ball besides Kobe Hudson, and it feels like we're sort of force feeding him. I don't see why Randy Pittman or Javarius Johnson can't get involved and do some other type of plays. We don't have to just rely on Kobe making miraculous deep threat catches to have a good passing game. Supposedly there's other talent there. Um, I don't know. It just feels like we're underutilizing other guys too. Pittman, Johnny Richardson, Penny Boone, the list kind of goes on. And then defensively, these guys that were supposed to brought in, to me, it just looks like it's Deshaun Pace that, and I guess Ethan Barr to an extent, but the rest of these transfers have not been great so far. And it just feels like that game was a microcosm of everything that has gone wrong in the Gus Malzahn era. And I just feel like that was kind of my breaking point for losing faith. I have defended him in a lot of different posts. You can look at videos I've done on YouTube where I talked about, hey, like there was some ridiculous times where people were talking about firing him in year 2 or even last year. And I always pointed to, hey, we had back-to-back 9-win seasons. Hey, we were ranked at a point in 2022. We made the conference championship game. He's a great recruiter. My thing at this point is I'm not sure if the game, he just can't adapt. He's unwilling to. He doesn't know how to at this point. But to me, all the goodwill with recruiting isn't enough if it doesn't translate to results on the field. And I do think he's a great guy. I really love everything he's always said about UCF. The whole, we're going to stay in state and recruit. If anyone actually stay there and build that program, it's a gold mine. All the stuff he said, I think he seems to be the most committed coach we've had since George O'Leary, no question. I just don't know if it's working for him. There was a lot of Auburn fans that had a lot of the same complaints that we're having kind of as a whole, as a fan base right now, and it's really materializing. And I just don't really see it getting better because this isn't a 1-game sample size. I'll say it again, this is a 3.5, whatever it is, year sample size of kind of the same things over and over, and I'm not sure that he has it in him to turn this around. I know that we need more time to still get in depth and all that, and we probably don't have the same NIL that other Big 12 teams have. We still don't have the level of recruiting as a whole that other Big 12 teams have, or haven't brought in enough classes being at the Big 12 level. But, when you talk about coming in the first year, we were the 3rd best Big 12 class. Last year, I think we were the 2nd. So you can't say that we are not able to recruit with them, even if they haven't had that much time to develop yet, and we don't have the resources and we don't have the Big 12 money yet. We don't have a full paycheck yet and all that. I get all that, but I'm not talking about coming in and being world beaters and going 12-0. I'm talking about being competitive. And with the recruiting classes that we've had and with the transfers of how they've been touted, I just feels like there's been really zero improvements as a whole from last year. If anything, it feels like there's actually been regression. Maybe a couple things are better, like obviously like linebacker, but kicking seems to have regressed or stayed the same compared to last year. Quarterback play honestly seems like it's regressed. Wide receiver play seems like it's regressed. O-line, I don't know, maybe around the same, I guess. Defensive line absolutely regressed. Secondary seems to have regressed. Just the coaching decisions at defensive coordinator have regressed. It just feels, like that. And look, maybe I'll look back at this post and chuckle, but I don't know. I just don't. When you start to see the same thing over and over and over again, it's really hard to like point to something and be like, okay, it's going to turn around. Okay, it's going to be different this time. Like, why would it be when it just hasn't been? I mean, 4 years is enough time to evaluate your coach and the direction of the program, and it just doesn't feel like he's elevating it anymore. And I'm not even calling for his head and all that. I'm just saying simply that I've lost faith in him. It's not up to me to choose the coach or when to fire him or anything. And I know there's financial limitations. We're not going to be able to fire him. I'm not even saying that. I just don't think he is the right leader of the program. And I may get proven wrong. Don't get me wrong. But I don't know. I looked at a bunch of stats. at when he was at Auburn, he, outside of the season that Gus Malzahn made the national championship, he only had 2 other years where he had an in-conference win streak of longer than 3 games. And there was multiple examples of, after those winning streaks, where they got like close to the top of the conference, they blew it in the last 3 or 4 games. There was multiple like 2 to 3 game losing streaks at the end of the season, where it just kind of shows a repeated nature of what happens. There's always some sort of collapse, and there's not sustained success. I don't think Gus Malzahn will ever be the type of coach that's 2-10 or 4-8. I think he'll always be, in the mix of being like having an okay season. But I just feel where UCF wants to go, where we all think it can go, is better than this. And I know it's still early in the Big 12, era and all that, but I'm not sure. I think Gus brought us to a certain point and the ceiling has been reached, and I'm not sure he can take it to that next level, which is competing consistently, being 9-10 win team consistently in the Big 12, getting to the point where we make the playoffs, even if it's just here and there, like, I don't know, once every 4 or 5 years, winning the conference championship once every few years, or being in it at least. I'm not sure he's that guy. I think he can pull a rabbit out of the hat here and there, but it feels like his overall coaching tenure has been mired in, I don't want to say mediocrity, but like slightly above average. And he'll always do enough to be a respected and decent coach, but never the one that's going to get you to the top. And I'm not sitting there thinking we can get the next Saban or, have the best coach in the world. But I do think, with the attractiveness of UCF, being in the Power Four, being in the state of Florida, a recruiting hotbed, that there is someone out there, I don't know who it is, that can recruit at least on a similar level. You can't tell me that UCF can't pull in like a top 35, 40 class with the position that we're in now, and then also develop and also make those in-game adjustments, and also be more keen to how college football works now, as far as scheme and playbook and things like that. There has to be someone there. Like, UCF is an attractive job. There's no other way of saying it. It's just the truth. And I just think we've hit our ceiling under Malzahn. I just don't see him, being someone that's going to consistently have us very competitive. And I'll say I'm not expecting 17-18 success, but UCF has had plenty of other really good seasons that weren't 17 or 18, where they won the conference. They were in big bowl games. That's, I think, is a very fair expectation. And I think we should be a contender in a 12-team playoff, I don't know, half of the decade, 40% of the decade, 30% of the decade. And I don't think Gus Malzahn can get us even to that 30% of the decade, where we're making the playoff or really close to the playoff. I think that's a very fair expectation when you have at least one guaranteed spot in the conference. Some years there could be two. I don't see why, we can't have a team that can do that when we're already on paper out recruiting these teams in the first 2 years of being in the conference. Why can't that? We're the only team in the state of Florida in this conference. Why can't we be, at that next level? And every chance that Gus Malzahn has had to bring us to that next level, he's failed in those opportunities. So I do actually like Gus Malzahn. I think he is a good ambassador. I think he cares. I think he wants to succeed here. I don't buy into he's just getting his, whatever you call it, like his contract to retire, kind of, just get one final paycheck. I don't believe that at all. He's clearly made efforts. I'm not saying that. I just think he's too set in his ways, too stubborn in his ways, and for that reason, have hit a ceiling, and I don't see us getting past that ceiling under him. So it sucks to say, but I like, Saturday was just my breaking point, and I feel like I've seen enough to say that this is going to be the norm. And I don't think we're going to lose out or anything like that, but I don't see this team as, and I said this on Twitter before the season, I said it to friends, I think we only marginally improved, despite all the booms and all that stuff. I was on record saying I think we only marginally improved, and I still believe that. We think we only marginally improved. I think this best case is like a 7-win team, and I actually still think there's a chance it could be worse, like a 5 or 6 win, when you consider that the schedule got a lot tougher than initially anticipated, with BYU looking great at 5-0. That's another thing. Like, who says you can't do it in year two? They're 5-0 and ranked number 17 as a new Big 12 team. Arizona State looks tougher than originally anticipated. Cincinnati looks tougher than originally anticipated. And then all the other teams you're playing were anticipated to be good, and they are. Utah's good. Iowa State's good. Maybe West Virginia's a little bit worse, but that's on the road. So I don't know. I just don't have the confidence based on what I've seen in 7 of 8 quarters against real competition, being outcoached, outplayed, out everything in those games. And I don't think the UF game really is a true indicator, win or loss. I guess it depends on the level of the loss, but like a win, I don't think that means, oh, all of a sudden we're fine for conference play. UF has a lot of their own problems, is about to fire their coach, so they're in a bad way. Obviously, the win will be great, just the story and a feel good, and it'll be great to be 4-1. But I don't see the outlook being that positive for the rest of conference play when it only gets much tougher than Colorado, who is technically supposed to be one of our easiest, or worst conference opponents. And, losing to Colorado when we were a 2-touchdown favorite, getting decimated at home with the fan support that was there, how we just got beaten every facet. To me, that showed me enough. Like, how much better of a team than we are that. Even if you take away a lot of the mistakes, I'm not sure that translates to that many more wins, even if that was, unless this game was a total anomaly. But, now seeing some guys redshirting, the press conference vibe was just really bad from both the players and the team. Everyone looked demoralized. Maybe that changes as they head up to Gainesville and start to get hyped up. But some of the air of that game and the hype of that game has just been popped and taken out of the room by the performance against Colorado. So, maybe I'm beating a dead horse here. I'm not trying to insult Malzahn, and I do appreciate like some of the great things he's done at the program. Like I said, I don't think his tenure is a total failure, but I just think we've reached a ceiling, and I've lost faith in the trajectory going upward from here. It just doesn't feel like under him it's going to get any better. And I don't know what that means for the program. Hopefully it does. Hopefully it turns around. Hopefully he figures it out. Hopefully I'm wrong. I would love nothing more than that. All I want is UCF to be successful. But, being 6-6, 7-5 every single year is not what we're trying to do. That's not okay. And I don't mean it to be like, oh, we have expectations like Ohio State or Alabama, but we're supposedly the gold mine. We're supposedly the sleeping giant. Well, let's turn into that. I don't think, anytime soon we're going to be a blue blood type of program. But there's plenty of non-blue bloods that are extremely competitive and really exciting every year, whether it's Utah, teams like that, right, that are really good, have a chance to make a playoff. They're always in the competition. And in TCU, they made the national championship. Why can't we do that? You know what I mean? Doesn't mean we're turning into a blue blood. That's not my expectation, but we can be competitive and potentially get to a natty one day, or get close to it, get to the final rounds of the playoffs. And that's where we're trying to get to. And that's where we want to get to. That's where I want to get to. That's where the fan base, and I think the program is dedicated to getting that. I think they really have made a concerted effort to become a Power 4 and be one of the 4 premier programs and no longer just be the big 3. I think they want to, and that's the goal. And I think in order to get that goal of being a premier program, not a blue blood, but a premier program in the national spotlight consistently, I just don't think it's going to happen under Malzahn. So that's my thoughts. I really do hope I'm wrong, and I hope we, can turn it around starting at Florida this weekend, and then, head into conference play and make some things happen. But, right now I just feel like I've lost a lot of faith in the direction under Malzahn, but I still believe in the program as a whole. I believe in the letters on our chest. But I don't necessarily agree with the leadership and where it's heading as of now. Things can change. College football is cyclical. You know, who knows, whenever the next coach happens, maybe is amazing. You know, our next Frost or whatever you want to call it, that really does great things here. And I know the potential is still in us, but the current trajectory to me is going in a way that I see as negative. But, you know, always here to support and root and love to hear everyone's thoughts. Go Knights, charge on.